So in this week's episode, I'll be talking about three of my favorite sports documentaries. The first one and my favorite, obviously, is a tennis documentary. It's my favorite sport. It's called Stokes of Genius. It's actually based on a book written by a sports journalist named L. John Wertheim. He's an American sports journalist. It's unusual enough to find a documentary based on a book, so you can imagine how unique this documentary might be on its own, because you normally find fiction films adapted from books most of the time. So the documentary is called Stokes of Genius because it is actually about the greatest tennis match ever played. I have followed the Federer-Nadal rivalry ever since I was a teenager, and this particular documentary is about the Wimbledon final they played in 2008, which was one of the longest finals played in Wimbledon history, and it was quite simply nothing like you've ever seen before. I mean, the match itself was a film. So you wonder how a film itself can be made on the match. But this documentary does a damn good job of it, because at least as a sports nut myself, and as probably the biggest Federer fan in Andheri right now, I can tell you that the documentary itself offers more than just footage from the locker rooms or interviews with people at the stadium or involved in the match or from each team. It actually offers you an insight into the minds of the players while they were playing the match, and that for me is the essence of sport as well as the essence of filmmaking. When both of them combine, you get a documentary like this. So the second sports documentary I definitely recommend was one I watched a couple of years ago. It's actually again a football documentary. As I said, some of the best films come from football for obvious reasons. It's called Next Goal Wins. It was made in 2014. Next Goal Wins is about the worst football team in the world. The country is American Samoa, which is an island of America in the in the Caribbean. Basically, the documentary is essentially about their struggles over, say, over like a 6-month period, when they actually set themselves the ambition to qualify for the 2014 FIFA World Cup. And we are talking about the worst football team in the world here. A team ranked so low that in 2001, they lost 32-0 to Australia. And Australia themselves are not one of the best football teams in the world. The documentary does a very good job of actually capturing how that defeat psychologically affected the entire nation to an extent where it took them around 12 years to recover from being humiliated to that extent. There were a lot of players who retired. I mean, most of them were semi-professionals or part-time footballers. A lot of them retired because of that defeat. There are little films throughout this big film. Like, you see the first transgendered footballer ever to play a football qualifier, and now he becomes a hero during the qualifiers. You see, you see the goalkeeper who had actually let in 32 goals 12 years ago, and how he plays PlayStation every time against Australia to sort of redeem himself. You see that same goalkeeper come back from retirement in 2014 to redeem himself. If that isn't inspiring and heartwarming to see, then I don't know what is. So the third sports documentary on my list is a documentary called Dawn Wall. It's a rock climbing documentary, and it's actually a genre. Rock climbing itself is a genre of filmmaking, at least in America. When you talk about mountain climbing documentaries, you're essentially talking about a cameraman or, say, a small team actually climbing the mountain with the people who are doing it. And that, for me, is what filmmaking is about. So Dawn Wall itself is about this American climber named Tommy Caldwell. He's actually a very famous climber. None of us may have heard of him here, but he's a big deal in the rock climbing circles, and he has been for a while. This is about his pursuit of particular rock surface called the Dawn Wall in Yosemite National Park in America. It's a 3,000 feet vertical surface. You see these obstacles put in as narrative devices in fiction films, but in documentaries they actually happen. So you're seeing a documentary maker follow Tommy Caldwell for, say, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, just expecting a story to happen. And it happens when nobody is looking, because even capturing the life of a professional mountaineer or a climber itself is a film on its own. As it turns out, one of the documentaries nominated for this year's Oscars in the 5 best documentary in category is a film called Free Solo. And Free Solo is again a spiritual successor to the Dawn Wall, again about a rock climber who is in similar circumstances, conquers like a particular surface. So, but for me, Dawn Wall stands out. I haven't seen Free Solo yet, but for me, if I had to see Free Solo maybe sometime soon this year, I'd watch Dawn Wall again. This is the peak of documentary filmmaking, craft-wise, emotion-wise. You get all your stories in this particular film, and you'll be moved to tears by the end. If you don't, then you're not human. So these were my three favorite sports documentaries. If you want more, stay tuned into this channel. This happens every week, and I'll see you soon.